You know, I've always heard that truth is stranger than fiction. And how this stamp mill came about, the donation of this stamp mill, was one of the most unusual things that a person could think of. It came out of the blue. In fact, it was the result of another donation that brought about this one. When a fledgling museum that doesn't have a museum can't expect to get money from anybody. So we were very active in pursuing donations. And I had made arrangements with Phelps Dodge to meet with their people down into headquarters in Phoenix. And they informed us that they were tearing down the reduction bill down at Douglas. And they called the fellow that was in charge of the operation down there and told him we were coming. And we went down and selected the stuff that we wanted. Then we put together a convoy of 2 flatbed semis and a big box truck. And I notified all the papers in Tucson and Phoenix and the TV stations, and even Bill Leverton, because I'd done some things with the Arizona Road, and he went with us on this trip. Well, however it works, that was reprinted by one of the newspapers in the Albuquerque newspaper. And since my name was mentioned, Mr. Joseph Jones called me at home one night, and he told me that he had a 20 stamp mill that he'd like to donate to us. So one of the board members, Ed Seifert, had a light plane, and he took the president, Clay Wurst, who owns a gold mine, and myself to Albuquerque, and he ran us up about 3/4 of the way to Santa Fe, up to the 8,000-foot level in the Jimenez Forest. And there was the town of Bland. And we surveyed the whole operation and looked the mill over and reported back to the board what we thought. Well, I pondered for the longest time what kind of equipment it would take to tear that building down and get this stuff out of there. But we were in the process of making a deal with Goldfield Ghost Town with Bob Shoes about locating our museum at Goldfield. And they were going to supply us with a shell building. In fact, we were the third business that came to Goldfield. And we, of course, had to do all the interior, the electric, the sheetrock, and everything. But he needed lumber. So we made the deal that he got all the lumber that didn't have anything to do with the stamp mill, and we got the stamp mill. There again, he had a front end loader. And that was the only piece of equipment that we had to complete this entire operation. Hank Brown, again, a fellow that has been involved with the museum for a long time and was on the Douglas trip and many other trips. He was the independent trucker. We made a contract with him to do all the hauling. He made 5 1,000-mile round trips bringing the stamp mill over there and some of the lumber, which mostly was loaded on a separate trailer. And we spent 28 days taking this mill down. And the most amazing thing about it was absolutely nobody got hurt, not even a pulled fingernail. I did throw a disc out the second day, but there was nothing you could do but keep going. And the tear down was complete. And then, of course, when we got back over to Goldfield, Bob put the stamp mill up at Goldfield. And it stayed there until we found this property. And after the property was found and it was the museum was being built, Hank Brown and I again, alone, moved the stamp mill, tore it down at Goldfield, and brought it down over here and put it back up, just the two of us, and with the boom trucks. About 3 weeks, I guess, after we were done, I got another phone call from Mr. Jones. And his first words is, he says, "Larry," he says, "the Smithsonian was here." "Huh, the Smithsonian, what did they want?" He said, "Well, they contacted me 5 or 6 years ago, and they said they'd like to have the stamp mill." And I said they could have it, and I never heard from them again. And when I read the story about you guys, I decided to give it to you. He said they had raised $50,000 to take it to Washington, D.C. And all I could say is, you're a little late. Anyway, the operation of putting this all back together, of course, the first thing we did was I had to buy a tractor. You know, the museum didn't have any money. And there was a tractor sitting about 2 miles south with a front loader on it, and I bought a cannon and a post hole digger and stuff that we needed for around here. And we leveled this area and built a little hill behind it, because we had to have a wall behind the stamp mill to attach, to stabilize these uprights. And so the first thing we did was scoop all this out and build the hill on the back. And then we built the forms for all these cement pillars that the motor boxes are sitting on. And we built all the forms. We used lots of rebar, 3,500-pound test cement. And the one on the end that we knew we were going to run was a little bit bigger than the rest of them. And then we built these supports on the side for the timbers that held the uprights. Then we put the uprights on, and then we put the stamps up in there after we put the cross member on top, and finished it up by making the roof. And using 2 boom trucks, we raised and put the roof on, because we never had any intention of putting it in a building, but it did need some protection from the elements, mostly the sun we were concerned about. So the roof was there just to take the worst part of the exposure to the sun and protect it. Well, we got it to this point, and at that point, Apache Land Movie Ranch burnt down, and we were donated the barn and Audie Murphy barn and the Elvis Chapel, and we were given 60 days to get it out of there. And we had a lot of trouble with that. The weather was terrible, and we lost about 30 days just due to weather. But we never got back to the stamp mill. And after I left the museum, these other gentlemen come in, and they actually got it running. It was our intention to do that, but we didn't have an opportunity. Oh, the stamp mill was basically the same. The operation for removing the gold was entirely, silver I should say, was entirely different. This was built on a hillside, a very tall hillside. And at the beginning, they used mules and pack panniers to bring the ore in, which was on the 3rd level. And there was an opening on the 3rd level at one end of the building that they could come in. Later they had tracks and ore carts, but that's the way it started with mules. And that would be dumped into a grizzly. A grizzly is nothing but a set of bars a certain distance apart, and only certain size ore would fall through the bars, and there'd be a guy or two there, the bigger pieces, they smacked them with a sledgehammer to get them through down to the fist size that they needed to operate. And then it went from the grizzly into the jaw crusher. The jaw crusher, there were several different types of jaw crushers, but mainly they had a stationary plate, sometimes on both sides, and the eccentric wheel would crush the rocks as that happened. And from the ore crusher, it went into the distribution system that's behind each one of these motor buckets. And this lever you see down there would dump a certain amount of ore into the bottom of the ore bucket each time that operated. And once this was crushed down from fist size to, say, pebble size, it would be pumped with water down to, it had 2 ball mills. However, the ball mills had been taken for scrap in World War II. Somebody managed to get them out of there. They were pretty large, but they did. And they also took a lot of parts off the drive shafts and stuff, the caps for the drive shaft for scrap. But anyway, it went through 2 ball mills, which virtually crushed the ore down to almost a powder. And then that would run down to the cyanide tank. And the cyanide tank had a very unusual system on it. You can see it over here. This is all cut down in size to about 1/4 of what size they really were. But they had a direct current system, electric system there. In fact, we even found some of the light bulbs that they were using, which were direct current. And this device was on top of each of the tanks. And the needle here, if the slurry got too thick, it would go over and set off an alarm. And the guys working in the slurry tanks would then add water or whatever they had to make that slurry just the right consistency. So they were constantly working on that down in the slurry thing. And then using that pump over there, that's the actual pump, they would pump up it to the bullion room. And then over behind here is the device that they melted the gold down into bars. And that's the way this operated. Well, I don't know exactly when they were torn down. I do know that they had a 20 stamp mill at Pinell City, and I think the name of it was Pinell City Mill. But it was leased by the Silver King mine. They didn't own it, they just leased it. And it was during the wars, after the wars, that the price of copper and silver dropped so much that they began to back off of the mining. But Silver King must have purchased part of the mill because they moved 10 of the stamps up to the actual mine site.
Thank you for watching this episode of Mysteries of the Superstition Mountains.